What's going on, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar, and today I have the pleasure of talking to two gentlemen in the comic book field. To my right is Cullen Bunn, making his second appearance on this channel. It's been a couple of years since I talked to you last. I think it was 2021 the last time we talked.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute. Good to be here.
I see your collection has grown, though. We can talk a little bit about that here in a second. And below him is Blacky Shepherd, who is the artist on this project they're both working on. And we'll talk a little bit about that here. So before going any further, though, a big thank you to Vince and Faust for putting this together for us. So connecting all of us together. So yeah, you guys have are working on a current project. It's on Kickstarter, and we put the link in the description of the video. This is H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator, The Eternal Life, Part 2. And it is being published by Dynamite, but there's a Kickstarter going on. I think it's got about 17 days or so left. Can you tell? Okay, I guess whoever wants to start. Who's the big fan of the Reanimator?
I think both of us are pretty well, deeply enmeshed into Reanimator fandom, Reanimator / H.P. Lovecraft fandom. Mm-hmm. We'd have to probably Indian leg wrestle to figure out who the bigger fan is, though. Okay,
Indian leg wrestle. That is one way to settle it.
Yeah, if it comes to any kind of wrestling, you have it, Blacky. You take the champ. You just do it. I'm not going to wrestle for it.
Sure.
So I assume both fans, you came because of the movie, like Stuart Gordon's movie, right? And then you found out about the original story, or vice versa. Did you read the story first and then found out about the movie?
I think I probably read a bunch of Lovecraft stories first, but the Reanimator story didn't get the publication that a lot of his other stories got. You couldn't find it as readily, So definitely, I discovered the Lovecraft stories first, but Reanimator in particular would have been probably through the movie.
That's definitely the case with me. I was very much a horror film nerd first, and then started reading horror novels, later. And so I had seen Reanimator the film, when I was way too young, and then kind of became aware of the fact that it was written by this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who I was aware of but hadn't really read anything by. And then sometime towards the end of elementary school, when I really started picking up a lot of novels and collections of stories and that kind of thing, that's when I discovered H.P. Lovecraft, and then the Herbert West Reanimator, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it series of short stories or novella or,
Okay. So I have talked to Cullen before in the past about, how he got started with writing comics, and then how he just got into this little corner, which is an actual huge corner of horror comics. But Blacky, I've seen your work in Transformers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Transformers guy. How did you transition from giant robots, even though your story did have like some Lovecraftian aspect to it, to, hey, I want to be the guy that draws some horror comics. That's what I want to do.
Well, I am primarily a horror artist. Like, that's where my bread and butter is. That's where my love of comics stems from, ever since I saw a very specific piece of art by Bernie Wrightson, I was set on the path, the infernal path. So the first thing that I did was Vampirella, and then I did Voltron with Cullen, and then I did, more horror, and then I just kind of fell into the Transformers from a chance meeting with one of the editors of IDW at WonderCon one year. And it was because of Voltron that they liked my Voltron work, so they asked me to do some Transformers stuff.
Got you. Because I know both of you had worked on Pumpkinhead before.
Yeah.
I also love that movie.
Near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, the first one. Even though the second one It's okay. But the
You know
first
what I
one,
found is
okay.
amongst the sequels, you can pick and choose scenes that if you were to push them all into one film would give you about 45 minutes of another really good Pumpkinhead movie. But it takes about whatever there is 4 sequels to get that 45 minutes. You know, they're not great.
You have a little bit of a static coming through your audio, by the way.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
I wonder if I should maybe just switch the regular phone. Does that sound any better?
I don't know. It's a little staticky, but not as bad as it was when you had the headphones on.
Okay. Well, you know, just tell me what you want me to do. I'm still trying to figure out this whole setup. After 4 years, you'd think I'd have it nailed down, but
It's okay. It happens. I forget to plug in my microphone from time to time after doing this for years, so I get it. It's technology, man. So how did you two first come to work together then? How did you find a common love for horror movies? Did you work at a convention, or did a project just come and appear to you?
I want to say we were introduced through that Voltron comic, right? Like that's where I met you. So Dynamite connected us on the Voltron book, and then as we talked about it, we started discussing comics and horror movies and everything else. It just came up that hey, we like a lot of those a lot of the similar things. So we did that, and then then the Pumpkinhead book came along, and then it's just a matter of we've been connected since then for a lot of those. We did Pumpkinhead, and then we did Vampirella and Reanimator, and then this Reanimator series. So the original connection though was through Dynamite made that introduction
through Voltron.
Yeah. So I took the Voltron project, and they said, well, how about this guy as an artist? And I said, no, not that guy, but they wouldn't listen to me. And here we are.
I wouldn't worry about that little guy.
So that's awesome. I'm glad that they made you guys work together. And I think sometimes that happens, right? Like you capture, I don't want to say lightning in a bottle because you guys are still working together. And it seems like kind of feed off of each other rather well. So that's good.
Yeah, well, what I found is Cullen's work. I was a big fan of Cullen's work before we started, working together. And once we got the chance to do Pumpkinhead, because I was really itching to do some horror work with Cullen. As much as I love Voltron, like I said, horror is my wheelhouse. And so once we got the chance to do that, and I hope Cullen feels at least mildly the same way, I kind of felt like we were simpatico with respect to what we look for in horror. I feel like if Cullen and I ever spent like a weekend watching horror films, we'd have a very similar, bent as far as, what the good stuff was.
Well, then we definitely got to talk about that here in a little bit because I'm curious. Okay, so both from a horror movie background, I love that, and I love how it translates in the comics. And Bernie Wrightson, is that where you would say like you fell in love with the idea of comics can just be as creepy as movies and books?
Yeah, for me, the thing is my first artistic inspiration was probably John Romita Sr., from his Spider-Man. Spider-Man was my dude, still is my dude. But then it didn't take me long to realize that I preferred like creepy and eerie and the Vampirella comics or the Vampirella magazines to superhero comics. Like I liked superhero comics. I loved horror comics. And the old EC stuff, just really lit me up. And so when I discovered Bernie Wrightson, I fell in love with him immediately, especially his stuff in eerie or creepy. I can't remember which one he did the most work for. But there was a very specific image that he did in, it was called Cycle of the Werewolf. It was a calendar that Stephen King wrote. And on one of the, and he did an illustration per month. And there's one illustration specifically where it's the werewolf is reaching into the truck of a mailman and he's like ripping his face off. And man, that just, it was like the light of creation shone on me, you know. And it's exactly what you say. I realized then, because that one image tells a whole story, and it tells a very gruesome and disturbing story at that. And I realized that comics were, at least for me, my preferred medium of conveying that information. You know, I'm a huge evangelist for comics. I think comics are one of the most powerful storytelling formats that we've ever come up with. There are things that you can do in comics, specifically with squashing and stretching time and attenuating time, that I don't think you can do or do easily in any other medium. And so I kind of fell in love with comics generally, and then fell in love with the ability to create fear and revulsion with comics, specifically from Bernie, from Daddy Wrightson, I like to call him.
That is a phenomenal story. I love that. I love that you immediately connected that, and just the imagery itself can be so creepy. And Cullen is no stranger to that. But now I have to ask him. So I know we've talked about like your body of work the last time you were here, but what was your first introduction to like horror comics, or was it mainly the movies, and then you were like, hey, you know what? I think I want to write some horror comics.
You know, my exposure to horror comics was, I was probably more into superheroes as a kid, but I grew up in this era when I could, my dad loved to go to garage sales, and you could get like a stack, you know, of comics this big for 50 cents, you'd get 100 comics. And it was just a mix of everything. A lot of superheroes, but there was a lot of Richie Rich and Little Devil and Archie. And also in that mix was a lot of horror comics. And I would sort the horror comics out. I would always, you know, when I get one of those random piles of comics, then part of the joy is you take it and you sort, okay, here's all the DC's heroes, here's all the Marvel heroes, here's all the horror comics. And I would sort those horror comics out. And I would go through sort of fits and spurts where I'd just go sit and read horror comics. And they were mainly Charlton anthologies or the DC anthologies. But I can tell you that Wrightson, I mean, to echo some of what Blacky said, Bernie Wrightson was the first artist that I remember recognizing, like by his style. I would say, oh, that's a Bernie Wrightson story. And I remember vividly the first Bernie Wrightson story I ever read was actually in an issue of Plop magazine, Plop, which was a comic that DC published. It was a humor book, but it was still hosted by all their horror hosts, Cain and Abel and the old witch, or whatever her name was, Hazel, I think. And they would host these this humor comic, and all the stories had a little bit of a dark bend to them. And the first story ever that I remember reading from Bernie Wrightson was about this sculptor who would he created a serum that he could pour into the clay, and whatever statue he made would come to life. And it was a scary little comic, even though it was in a horror magazine. But that's the first one I remember. That's the first story I read by Bernie Wrightson. And I could always, from that moment forward, I knew a Bernie Wrightson story when I saw it. They're kind of hard not to see. So that drew me to a lot of horror comics, because I was a huge fan of his work. And and the crossover of superheroes and horror with like the original Swamp Thing run and stuff like that was a pretty easy bridge for me to cross. And somewhere along the way, I just started becoming a horror guy more than anything else. So when I started doing comics, most of the original stuff I was pitching was either dark fantasy or had a horror bend to it. Even if it wasn't, a straight balls to the wall horror story.
Man, I love hearing these the background of how you both got started or how you went down this particular path when it came to comics, because comics is a medium, or you can go anywhere with it. And I know, like I mentioned to Blacky, like I know that he had done Transformers and Voltron, and with Cullen, I've seen your work in X-Men, and I've seen your work in Magneto, which I'm still hoping one day we get a Bunn Omnibus.
Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. Where's that? Where's that?
Where's that? I tell you what, man. If I don't go a week, do you remember the last time in 2021 I said, man, there's all this demand for Harrow County to come back to print, and you were like, yeah, we'll see. Yeah. There's not a week that goes by, dude, that I don't get some kind of email or some kind of comment on a video. Is Dark Horse ever going to reprint Harrow County Library editions?
I get those same emails. I was just at a convention last weekend, and that's the number one question I get from people. There's a few standard questions, but when are the hardcovers going to get reprinted is a big one. And I don't know the answer. I do know the answer. I think I know what the answer is up here. And I think it's sort of like tumblers in a lock. There are certain things that have to fall into place, and then those hardcovers will be back like that. And we just have to wait for those tumblers to fall into place.
Well, if there's anything I can do to help and persuade them, and I've tried for a couple of years.
All your viewers, just reach out to Dark Horse and demand them. I mean, they do listen to the feedback of the readers.
That is very true. And and I've been in contact with them for a while now, and they're really good people to work with. I think they still look at things like the book market, and this might be a little behind the scenes of like how things work, as far as like, we're going to go hardcover, and then once that's gone, soft covers, and that's it moving forward. And I think they're still stuck in that type of way of working, whereas other publishers are like, whoa, there's a huge demand for hardcovers. So let's see about that.
Yeah. It's a puzzle, I think, that a lot of publishers haven't figured out exactly. I mean, I haven't figured it out, so I'm not saying I have the answer. I don't know what the answer to that is. I definitely, when I am in my cups, it's often something that I think about and discuss ad nauseum about what's the way to make these, to make this stuff work. Because I would love to live in a world where everybody that wants Harrow County in hardcover can get it. And, it's and I think they will come back. I have faith that they will come back. I just can't say for sure when that will be.
Okay. That's a good answer. I'm so glad that people, well, not that you're being asked 100 times over and over again, but it is a nice feeling to be like, hey, I wrote that and people want it in print. Yeah. Cool. But it is a good thing to have. And you, oh my gosh, man, your body of work is insane. Like, I made the comment in 2021 when I interviewed you that I think you write more than I read, and I read a lot, which is insane. Cause you still every month, it feels like there's a Cullen Bunn book coming out. It's insane. Do you ever sleep?
As little as humanly possible. Because when there's a month that there's not a Cullen Bunn book coming out, I'm going to be in full blown. I won't be sleeping then either, because I'll be in full blown panic mode. Because there's a lot of books coming out, but that doesn't mean. I don't think it means what a lot of people think it means. I mean, a lot of books doesn't necessarily equate to any level of comfort, and there's a. That's the thing. As soon as those books aren't coming out, I'll be super scared. I mean, I'm already super scared, but I'll be even more terrified when those books aren't coming out.
Hashtag freelance life.
That's right. That's just part of being a freelancer. I had a guy knock on my door yesterday, and he was like, he wants, wanted to look at the roof or something, and he said, well, you got to call your insurance company and do that. I said, I don't have time to call the insurance company. I work from home, so I'm always working, and I don't want people working on my roof during my work week. And he said, oh, well, we could do it on a Saturday or Sunday. And I laughed, and I said, my work week runs Monday to Sunday, or if you start your week on Sunday, Sunday to Saturday, and there are no days off in that work week. So don't, it makes things a little difficult on that front.
So what is okay? So I'll start with Blacky, because this is a question that I do have for both of you. What is your usual routine on a daily basis as a comic artist, right? Like you get the script, like say you get Cullen's script. Do you read the entire issue? Do you go page by page? Do you talk to him and be like, hey, can we change this? Like how does an artist, like, the routine work for you?
Kind of all of those things. So depending on the project and depending on Cullen's time, commitments and that kind of thing, sometimes I'll get the full script and I'll give it a whole read, because I like to read through the whole thing and get a cohesive picture of what the story is about. Sometimes I'll get 4 pages at a shot, and then a couple days will go by, I'll get another couple pages. Sometimes, like in Reanimator's case, it'll be done in outline form, so because we're kind of doing it Marvel method on this one. And so he'll send me, an outline that says, page 1 through 3, these things happen. Page 4 through 6, these things happen, that kind of deal. And then what I do is I'll thumbnail it out, which is basically just stickman sketches for the most part, just to try to get the action and the storytelling down and make sure that I've got the concepts and the camera angles and everything meets everybody's, demands, because, you want Cullen to be happy with the way I've laid out what he's written. And you also want the editor to be happy and make sure that it's hitting all the editor's notes. And then once everybody signs off and says, yeah, these look great, then I get to work drawing. As far as a routine, my only real routine is wishing I had a routine. My biggest problem is that, I want so badly to be able to wake up at 8 in.the.morning and draw until 5 or 6, and then have my evening free, and then choose to have Saturday off. But it just doesn't work like that. When you're a freelancer and you work from home, just like Cullen said, it seems like there's always something, like on my way to do a podcast, I hear a dog emergency in the backyard, or, the people that are going to come look at the electrical problem I've got going, and I'm trying to get a deadline finished. And, so I usually wind up getting most of my art done very, very late at night into the small hours, because that's when everybody's asleep. The dogs are asleep, but, my wife's asleep, the world is asleep. And so I'm the only one up, burning the midnight oil, because I'm left alone and I can get my drawing done. And I'm a night owl anyway, so it doesn't hurt my feelings.
Okay, so so I do YouTube full time. This is what I do for a living, and it was just kind of the way the universe worked out. Lost my job in 2020, and I was in IT for 20 years.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It was crazy, but a lot of people lost their job in 2020.
Well, I mean, IT specifically. I was in
Oh
IT
yeah, I was good at it, but I never liked it. I was good at it, but I just never liked it. It's not what I wanted to do. It's not where my passion was. So, oh my gosh, that's kind of the only thing that I got from that and carrying it over to this was actually okay, I got to get up at 7. I got to do this normally. And I've always heard artists, it's interesting that like what you just said, the way that you described yourself and your routine. It's exactly what I've heard other artists say too. Like, yeah, I'm more of a night owl, so I usually stay up. My wife doesn't like it, or my kids give me like, they're like, hey, can we go and do this? And you're too busy drawing. So I think it's really interesting to see how that works. But it makes me feel better too that your routine is like kind of take it daily as well.
Well, and I'd be interested to hear Cullen's twist on this as a writer, because one assumes that you need that alone time, you need that silence, you need those stretches of time when you're not interrupted. But one of the things that dictates my productivity is, as an artist, when I sit down to draw, there's that constant struggle between, am I motivated to draw right now? Do I have the creative juice to draw right now? And the truth of the matter is when you're an artist and you're working freelance and you got to turn in pages in order to get paid, you can't always wait to be inspired. You can't always wait to have creative juice. Sometimes you just got to coffee up and do it. And that's the unfortunate truth. Now, I'm lucky insofar as I find once I actually sit down and start drawing, I get into it very quickly and I enjoy it. And, but sometimes it's a little hard because I'll think, I was up until 7 a.m. and I slept until noon and now I've got to start drawing again. And, it can be a little bit hard on the bones,
Okay. So what about you, Cullen? How is your day? You said you work Sunday through Saturday, right?
Yeah, I work every day, and just it's come up a lot for me recently. Oh, you're glorifying overwork, or you're encouraging other people to overwork. I'm not. Stop it. Cut that out. Stop saying that. Stop saying dumb stuff. I'm not saying anything about overwork because my schedule is not for everybody. It's not for most people.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I like to do, though. I enjoy this, and I'm unhappy when I'm not working on what I'm doing, when I'm not working. So, my standard schedule is from about 8:30 till about 5:30 every day I write. And that's what I do. Now, and when I'm saying I write, some of that is writing. A lot of it is answering emails or doing marketing projects for writing or interviews or whatever. So when I say I'm writing, there's a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with writing that's tied into all that. Because as a freelancer, I have to do all my marketing for the most part. I have to, I don't have someone who answers my emails for me, unfortunately. But my goal is to, pretty much take it as a daily job. All those interruptions, like you mentioned, though, are real. So I can't always accomplish that. So the goal I give myself is in order to do all these projects that are coming out, I have to write 5 script pages a day, 5 pages every day. And that means if I don't write 5 today, I've got to write 10 tomorrow. So as long as I am at a 5 script pages a day, I am moving through these projects always. Now, some days I write 20 pages a day. Some days I write 2. But for the most part, my goal is a standard 5 a day, and I'm in good shape. And then I also, after the 8:30 to 5, there's a lot of times I'll go somewhere and I'll sit somewhere for a couple of hours and I work on outlines or I answer emails or, other things that are tied to the actual scripting process. So I do that as well. And again, it's not that I'm not feeling like, if I don't do this, I've got to keep it going. It's what I enjoy doing. I'm not saying I enjoy it every day. I don't think anybody enjoys everything every day, but I enjoy what I'm doing. And yeah, like Blacky said, when those days come where the inspiration doesn't hit, well, I have to force that inspiration. I have to keep moving. Keeping the lights on, roof over my head. That's plenty inspiration for me to work when I don't feel like it.
But you guys are both fans of horror comics. The Gemstone Publishing collections of the EC archives has one of my favorite intros, and it kind of means a lot more to me now than it did when I first read it, when it was first published back in I think 2006. But it was Dean came and talking about his dad Jack being an artist for EC Comics, and he was talking about how when he was a kid, he was like he would see other kids go out with his dad, and one day he came up to his dad at the drawing table, and he was like, I feel really bad for you, Dad, because you never take a break. You're always working. You're always drawing. And his dad said, don't feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for all the other dads out there that are busting their ass, being miserable at the place that they work. I love what I do for a living, and that really stuck with me. And what you just guys, what both of you were talking about, like working every day and working with your own schedule, and Cullen talking about overwork, that kind of reminds me of that introduction.
Oh yeah, I write comics. That's a pretty, it's hard for me to. It's a job, and there are things about the comic book industry I don't like, and there are things that certain publishers I may not like, but it's still comic books, and that's a pretty keen job, at the end of the day. You talk about working at IT for 20 years. I worked in IT for 5 years. I mean, the secret of that was I had no clue what I was doing. I convinced them that I knew what I was doing in IT. I know nothing about IT. I am completely clueless. And that was a skill I picked up, transitioned into comics, because I know nothing about comics, obviously. And I'm still going forward. And they never figured it out in the IT, so hopefully comics never figures it out either.
Well, to that, I worked in IT as well, and I, it got to the point where my gut was killing me. I was losing hair. I was fighting with everybody, my wife, my friends, my family, and but I was making crazy good money. And, once I realized, I went to a comic convention and I was on the floor for maybe 8 minutes, and I was like, oh, I guess I gotta quit my job and start drawing comics, So I went to my wife, and, she just had one response to my question of what would you think if I quit my job making nearly 6 figures and, start trying to break into comics where I may get work. And she just said, well, can you not be a dick all the time? And I said, yes, I promise. And she said,
what a lie you told her. What a lie.
It's a different form of that, though.
Oh, all right. It's just to everybody else now.
Right. Now everybody else gets the brunt. But the thing is, like, because I've heard that same thing. I'll talk to people about my work schedule or how much effort it takes, because sometimes, man, it can take me 12, 14 hours to draw a page, because I'm fairly detailed and I don't draw as fast as some other artists. And so it can take me a really long time. And so that requires that I'm kind of always disciplined and sitting down at the desk and working lots and lots and lots, which, like Cullen said, you can get, I call them work shamers. People will say, well, you're just, pushing people to work themselves to death and overwork and the whole 9 yards. And just like Cullen says, I'm not pushing anybody to do anything. This is how I function. If it weren't healthy for me, if it weren't something that I enjoy, that I wouldn't do it. But there's also a certain stark reality that is, if you want to be a freelancer, and if you want that freedom that being a freelancer, engenders, and if you want to, chase your passion as part of what you do, chances are, man, you're going to have to work more than a 40-hour week. You're going to have to decide, weekends aren't all that important to me. You're going to have to sacrifice free time. You're going to have to live in crunch mode for long stretches of time. And if you don't want that, if that's not healthy for you, don't decide to be a comic book artist.
I think sometimes it's a case of definitely the grass is greener, and people don't realize how much how much goes into it.
Well, one of the things I have said many times at conventions or if I'm doing a panel or whatever, and this applies mostly to breaking in as a comic book artist, because breaking in as a comic book writer, I think, is much, much more difficult. Because, an editor can see a page of art and within a split second, they'll know, okay, this guy knows how to construct a page. He knows from storytelling. He knows left to right, the whole deal. Whereas for a writer, they've got to actually stop, clear their attention and read for however long it takes to read a spec script or a script, and that can be a much harder thing for an editor to do than to just take that 5-second glance at a page and go, yeah, I think this guy can do it. So when people say, how do I break into comics? I'll tell them, well, here's the thing. So you're in a room with 100 people, and all 100 of those people want to be comic book artists, and they all think they're good enough to be comic book artists, and they've all got their portfolio under their arm. Well, the unfortunate truth is 50% of those 100 people just aren't good enough. It sucks to say, but the unfortunate reality is they just don't have the talent, or they haven't developed the skill, or for whatever reason, they're just not good enough. So now you're down to 50 people. Of those 50 people, 50% of them aren't going to be fast enough. They, they're try as they might, they're not going to be able to pull that, page a day or page every couple of days off. So now you're down to 25 people. Of those 25 people, half of them don't have the right disposition to work with an editor and have the editor say, hey, you need to change this, this, and this, and them not get butthurt and allow the editor to give them that creative direction. So now you're down to 12 people. Of those 12 people, half of them don't have the stamina to sit at a drawing table for sometimes 10, 12, 14 hours a day and knock out the page because they've got to get it done. So now you're down to 6 people. Of those 6 people, half of them just don't have the wherewithal to realize that this is not the kind of life they want to lead. They think, oh, drawing comics is going to be amazing, but once you get into that life, you realize this is terrible, man. I don't have a steady paycheck. I've got to constantly be hustling. I've got to work really fast, sometimes for, several hours a day. This is no good. So now you're down to 3 people. Those 3 people will get work, but you're still in a room with 100 people, right? So you're in that line,
That is a hell of an eye opener as far as like the realism of expectations and what's to come when it comes to working in the comic book industry. I think for a lot of us that grew up, it's one of those things like, oh, I want to be a comic book writer. I could tell stories like this. I have ideas, but getting off your ass and actually doing them. That's why I love talking to comic book creators, people that have actually done stuff. They're trying to promote themselves on Kickstarter to get their stuff going, and they've actually produced work. I think it's amazing to do that, because it's one thing to be a fan and say, I've got ideas. It's another thing to actually put those ideas on paper and get that stuff printed. And it's a hell of a journey. And man, like, I got to give you guys props for that determination to keep on going too, because I'm sure it is very, very, how do I put this? It's very detrimental to your mental health when things aren't going the way that you think they were going to go, right? Like because looking at it from an outsider's perspective of, hey, I want to work in comics, and then being in there and like what Cullen was saying, if I don't write 5 pages, this stuff is not going to pay for itself. I got to keep this going.
And that deficit just grows. Like you said, if you don't write 5 pages on Monday, you got to write 10 pages on Tuesday. And if you don't write 10 pages on Tuesday, now you got to write 15 pages on Wednesday.
Basically, what we're saying is I have to write about 300 pages tomorrow.
I'm sorry to cut into your time. Okay, then I have to ask the other obvious question is, as you're writing, because art is different and everybody's different, but as you're writing, are you having to completely be shut off from the world, like, or do you write when you could have like Seinfeld on in the background or something, or music? Like, or do you have to have it quiet? Because everybody's different. And the same thing with you, Blacky, like with artwork.
Yeah, I can't watch a TV show or something like that when I'm writing. I can listen to music, but typically I want to listen to music without lyrics. But most of the time I forget to do it. I just forget to turn something on. So I'm usually I'm writing in silence. I have a television in my office that sometimes I'll put a movie on and I'll just turn the sound off, so that when I walk across the room, I see Godzilla blowing up Space Godzilla or something. But for the most part, I definitely can't watch. I can't watch TV when I'm writing, and music. I can listen to it, but I often don't.
I'm somewhat similar, although I would assume silence is more important to Cullen because there's a lot of gears turning and trying to. I'm guessing it's hard to come up with dialogue when you've got dialogue, coming out of the TV. It's hard to come up with pacing and that kind of thing. For me, I'll put on either like I can put on a television show or a movie as long as I've seen and am very familiar with it, because otherwise it's going to grab my attention and I'm going to want to, pay attention to the plot, whereas if I'm drawing, I'll throw on Creepshow and I'll only look up for those shots that I remember. Oh yeah. Okay. Here's where he pulls her head off, and I'll watch that and then I'll go back to drawing, someone getting their head pulled off. Or I can put on music. Music doesn't bother me. The problem with music though is I get bored, and I'll think, okay, I've heard 3 songs on this album. I want to hear another 3 songs. And so I spend more time shuffling through music than I do actually drawing. I can put on podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts, particularly comedy podcasts. Those seem to go really well because they're not very intrusive to my creative process. But I just can't have anything that draws my attention for any, real length of time.
Yeah, I understand.
It's and it's a little opposite of what I just said, because I also do love. I mean, I mentioned it earlier. I love going to work at a bar or a coffee shop. I like sitting at a bar and writing, or out. I mean, more often than not, I'm outlining or something else. But I do like that, which is a holdover from college, I think. Working through the white noise of everything. So
yeah, see, I could never go to a bar or a coffee shop or anything like that to draw. Even at comic conventions, I've tried to, take my tablet and draw at comic conventions. But the problem is I get so distracted by the people around me, or if someone stops to ask me a question, or, at a comic convention, you're talking to people all day. And my problem is then once that person walks away or I'm no longer distracted, it takes me a good couple of minutes to get my brain back to where I was and get back to, the place that I need to be in order to draw the page, and so it's anathema to my process.
Yeah, I've seen, and I guess it varies, right? Like some people can completely shut off the world. And I'm very jealous of those people.
I'll go and do conventions and I'll see, an artist from a comic book that, and he's over there talking to somebody, literally actively talking to somebody and continuing to draw. And then the person will walk away and he'll just go right back to drawing. And I think, what is wrong with my brain that I can't do that? But
I don't work like that. I'm kind of like somewhere in between with you guys when I'm editing. Like I got to put something on in the background, but like both of you said, it's got to be something that doesn't get my attention. So it's got to be something I've seen over and over. And because I work by myself, I kind of like noises in the background. I thought about going to like a coffee shop or bars, but then I might get distracted there too. But that's an interesting take. So now that we've kind of worked a little or talked a little bit about the behind the scenes of how the process of both of you is when it comes to work, tell me about this book that both of you are putting together. The one that's on Kickstarter. The link is in the description of the video, by the way, and I'll put it in the chat right now. Tell me about this H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator, The Eternal Lie.
Well, Reanimator, The Eternal Lie is it's it's a horror series that we are doing that is a direct sequel to the original short story Reanimator. It's not connected to the movies. It's not connected to the other Dynamite Reanimator stories, which a lot of those are set in modern day. This is set in the 30s. It takes place pretty much right after that original short story. And the idea behind it is someone has stolen Herbert West's reanimation fluid. This group has stolen the serum, and they have nefarious purposes in mind, nefarious purposes on a cosmic scale. And Herbert West is not a hero. He's not saying I have to stop them to put an end to this evil. He wants to stop them because that's his serum, and he doesn't want anyone else to have it and anyone else to use it, and heaven forbid anyone else improve upon it. So Herbert West is on a mission to get that serum back, and it sets out, and from there it connects in a bigger way. The original short story was never connected to the Cthulhu mythos in any way, but this comic is. And what we've got on Kickstarter right now, the Kickstarter is for Herbert West, The Eternal Lie Part 2. But if you missed the original crowdfunding campaign for Part 1, you can still get the book as part of this one. So you can get Parts 1 and 2 right through this Kickstarter campaign and not miss a beat.
And it looks like you can also get the Vampirella book too, right?
You can get the Vampirella in there. It's not connected to this story, but as Blacky will point out, the Reanimator we wrote in that story is very similar personality-wise to the Reanimator of The Eternal Lie.
Yeah, there's definitely connective tissue in the character of Herbert West between the two. But as far as like timelines are concerned, the Vampirella versus Reanimator is very much a modern day story, takes place in the modern era. Whereas, The Eternal Lie, like Cullen said, is set in the 30s and is a direct continuation of the original story.
Okay, I got you. So is this something that you can see continuing into another volume, and then maybe one day have it all in a nice hardcover format?
I think that's always been the hopes and dreams, that we would continue. We do at least another one, another couple of them. I could see it continuing, in success, all things being possible.
And okay, so let's see here. What is the difference of doing something like this than something that you guys have done in the past with different publishers, whether it was Transformers or G.I. Joe or X-Men or Magneto? Like, what makes this different?
Well, for me, it's, because horror is so near and dear to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was over the moon when I got the chance to draw the Transformers, because I am a kid of that era, so it was, as I told my editor at IDW, it's every time I draw Hound or Optimus Prime or Shockwave or Bumblebee, it's, the inner 11-year-old is like, yeah, but as fulfilling and as satisfying as that is, every step I take is a step, that my horror role models took before me. When I contribute to the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, I feel like I'm in the club, with Bernie and Robert Bloch and all the people who have contributed, to those mythos, and it's very important to me to be a good steward of that tradition, because, I know that somewhere out there's another 12-year-old kid who just moved to a new town, so he doesn't have a whole lot of friends, and, his main social outlet is cracking open that comic and getting transported by art that blows his mind and a story that blows his mind. And I should be gender and specific, young girl. same thing, and so for me, it's not just a huge honor to be drawing this stuff and a huge thrill because I like drawing it, but it's also a responsibility because I find horror to be an archetypal type of story, much like westerns. They deal in big broad archetypes that allow for people to see themselves in it, like in the book Dance Macabre, Stephen King talks about why we like horror, and it's that idea that it's the catharsis of being able to live the danger without actually being in danger. And I think there's also a flip side to that. It's the catharsis of being able to indulge those dark thoughts without actually indulging those dark thoughts, and so I find it to be very important, on a kind of pretentious level. I find it to be very important, but then I also find it to just be a lot of damn fun. Like when Cullen writes, and then he dies in a grisly way. I think, all right, how grisly are we talking?
And Cullen, you actually both of you mentioned the editorial control. Does this particular project that you guys are working on, does it have more freedom per se than other things that you guys have done?
Every project is different for me. So every project has sort of a different flavor, and I enjoy different. I enjoy most of the stuff I do in some way, and they're often different. I'm sorry, I'm smiling because your crew over here, these comments, I like seeing they've got some interesting questions going on. I'm going to answer these questions, but
yeah, we're gonna get to some.
But no. So I don't know that this one had any. I mean, it didn't. I don't feel like going into this project, we had any heavy-handedness in terms of editorial. And for the most part, in 90% of the stuff I work on, in creator-owned stuff, I don't have a lot of editorial input. It's what I do, and it's it's my project. You do get a little more when you don't own the property, and I think, I don't feel like we got a lot of pushback on what we wanted to do with this story. The biggest thing was, and I didn't realize it going into it, is we couldn't do anything with the movie Herbert West. It had to, we can't touch the stuff from the Herbert West, the Reanimator movies. So we had to go with the original story and follow that. We had to follow that, and that's probably the biggest, sort of restriction we had is I had to keep in my mind, is this from the book? Is this from the movie?
Oh, right. Because if you grew up with the movie, then this is the way that that you would remember, or the character would act. That would make it
that. Like, so when we did Vampirella versus Reanimator, one of the things that I brought to it that I was hoping, because I didn't realize that at first either, I was really hoping to have Barbara Crampton's character kind of haunting Herbert West, right? And constantly like in his ear, like, you're gonna fail, like hating him for what he did to her and Dan from the movie. But then of course, we couldn't play in that sandbox, and she's not a character that originally appeared in the short stories, so we weren't able to use her. And then additionally, I couldn't design Herbert West to look anything like Jeffrey Combs. You know what I mean? And in fact, Jeffrey Combs and I love this guy. It hurt my feelings so much. He kind of came out against the comic, the Herbert or Reanimator versus Vampirella, saying that he hadn't signed off on this, and we were wrong to be doing it. In fact, he called me a thief, and I didn't reply. But I replied, I'd have said, well, it's a public domain character, man. That's why you were able to make a movie about it in the first place, because, Stuart Gordon didn't have money to buy the rights to anything, so he used a public domain character. And so that was a bummer, but we were limited in what we could do with respect to, any similarity to the movie. But aside from that, like, I think the only editorial direction I got, every now and then Matt would send me an email like, hey, don't you think you drew this guy's head a little too big? Or, maybe give us more on the background in this one, because it looks like they're swimming in space, or, things like that.
Got it. Okay. I'm always curious how the different projects, especially when you're working on things that, on your own.
And if I could, very quickly. So unfortunately, I'm not able to see the chat, so I just kind of went over and I saw one person ask the question, are there any cool female Transformers? And the answer is definitively yes.
Yeah, for sure there are.
Can we talk about that? I didn't know if you guys wanted to go down that road, because I'll be talking about that all day long.
Are females. Windblade is a strong favorite. Moonracer is a strong favorite.
What about the OG? RC.
She's a badass, man.
Yeah. So, I actually pitched IDW on, I wanted to do like a Charlie's Angels, right? And have like Windblade, RC, and Moonracer, and Chromia as like a team. And they were like going to solve a problem, but they were kind of busy.
Yeah, I picked, when I was doing the big crossover of all the Hasbro properties for IDW years ago, any character in there only got to be in it for like a few seconds, really, a few panels. But I was dead set that I wanted Jim from Jim and the Holograms to be riding RC and going like racing through the city streets. And I was really set on let's making that happen, but it
didn't happen. That's crushing to hear that was an idea, because I would have squealed with delight, as they say.
Right. Those IDW books, I've always said, like, so I grew up with Transformers too, like most kids our age, but those IDW books, man, those are like my favorite incarnation of Transformers. I love those books. What the things they were doing on there for people that didn't get to read them, and who knows who owns the publishing rights now. That's still a secret for some reason. They were phenomenal for what they were. So
yeah, love them.
I'm glad that you brought up that question though, because
that's one of the ones I was hoping somebody would bring up. I know it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Really. Right. And I was like, ooh, I can talk about Transformers, the animated movie, which is still my favorite.
Oh my gosh, yeah. My daughter and I have a tradition now where we go to conventions and we get the voice actors to sign our movie poster with our favorite quote from their characters. Sadly, there's a lot that have passed away. But some of them are still around, and they're just a joy to talk to. Like voice actors are a completely different level. All right, let's see here. JT Gamer is asking me, Colin, if you were given Amazing Spider-Man, would you bring back the wedding? If you no editorial mandate, if you were given Amazing Spider-Man to write, would you bring back the classic MJ Peter Parker?
Do you know how much stuff I would bring back that Marvel has forgotten or done away with if I were given the chance? I think, and I don't know if this is a popular decision or not, because I'm not a huge Spider-Man guy. I'm not. I read Spider-Man, like Spider-Man. I wrote a few Spider-Man stories. I remember I liked Married Spider-Man. So, and I really didn't like how it was done away with back in the day. So, and I don't know, that feels like it was a long time ago. Maybe it wasn't. It feels like it was a long time ago.
That it was done away?
Yeah, that they got rid of the
Brand New Day? Oh my gosh.
Well, they've done it a couple of times, right? First there was it went away because of Mephisto, and then it came back, and now it's been done away with again.
Well,
I think it'd be cool. I actually kind of liked it. I would probably try to bring it back. I would, but there's a lot. I don't want. My big thing with Spider-Man is I've always wanted to do a Web of Spider-Man series, and I've pitched this. When I was working for Marvel a lot, I pitched this many times. I always wanted to bring Web of Spider-Man back, and for it to be a super dark horror themed Spider-Man, and that was my plan for Spider-Man. And in the nature of that book, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to bring the marriage back probably anyway. It probably just wouldn't have fit in with that story. But But that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a dark Spider-Man series called and bring back the title Web of Spider-Man.
All right. So there's your answer.
Just for the record, I prefer a broken, lonely Peter Parker.
It seems like that's
Who hurt you? Who hurt you?
that's the way he's been written for a while now. Oh my gosh. And you're right. I think it's been almost 20 years since one more day. It's been a long time.
I like married Spider-Man. You can't I mean, and then I'm just gonna kill Mary Jane. I mean, just to piss people off.
That's how you do it. This is how you get death threats, Cullen.
That's not true. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do that.
Any plans to do any more Cyberpunk 2077 titles? I love the Trauma Team.
No plans to do it. I would love to. I loved writing Trauma Team. I was really surprised. That's one of those books where I was writing it. I was like, I don't think anybody's going to like this thing. I've been really surprised by the response to Trauma Team. I think, I get people talking about it all the time. They really like it. They get what I was trying to do with sort of a PTSD storyline. And when I say I'm surprised is because when they asked me to do that, I pitched 5 different series. And Trauma Team was my least favorite pitch, and it was their favorite pitch. I liked it, but it was of the 5 I pitched, that was like, oh, this is the one I'd like to do the least. And that was the one that everybody was hyped up on for me to do. So I'd love to do those other 4 series anytime.
There's your answer. That's a good answer. All right, so I do want to talk about this. This might be our last question, though, so I'm going to come back to that one. Blacky, in the OG Reanimator, he got bored and started to reanimate just body parts. How are you going to top that?
I feel like I did top it. Yeah.
Cullen's saying don't spoil it.
Don't spoil that.
I'm only going to mention a couple of little grace notes that I put into Volume 1. You'll notice that in one of the shots of Volume 1 where he's in his lab, he has 3 decapitated heads sewn together so that their brains are being shared. And then the fluid is in the pan, kind of keeping them alive. And of course, they've got looks of just abject terror and trauma on their faces. So it's things like that. I in my brain, Herbert West has absolutely no regard for life or individuals. It's all about the pursuit of his science. And so he's more than willing, enthusiastically willing, one might say, to do really, really terrible things to people in the hopes of discovering some new method of reanimating tissue and bringing his formula closer to what he wants it to be.
Wait till you see what he reanimates.
Yeah, there's that.
Okay.
Luckily, Cullen handled that question for me because you just got to see what happens. It's I'll tell you, this story is so deep, and it allows for such a gruesome and big expansion of the Herbert West character that, yeah, I almost can't say anything else,
Thank you so much for that answer. And Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man is a horror, right? There was a Deadly Foes of Spider-Man, or Superior Foes of Spider-Man. There was a Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Was it a Deadly? I can't remember.
It's a cool title. I mean,
I like that title too.
It's a cool title. I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember it, but that doesn't mean anything. It's a neat title if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I like that. All right. I'm going to ask this question. Somebody was bringing it up, and I feel like it can open up a bunch of doors, so it might be the last question, just because I'm curious, too, and it was something I wanted to ask you all a little bit earlier, and that is, what are your favorite horror movies? Like, growing up, like, as a kid, there are horror movies that will stick with you, and you go back and revisit, and you're like, yeah, it wasn't that great, but that movie still kicked ass. like, are there movies like that? And then as an adult, like, are you following certain horror movies? Because this is something I'm curious about too. Like, what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, look, I'm a big horror movie guy. I love, I love the genre. I love so my favorites are going to go back to when I was a kid still, because Jaws was the first movie I saw in the theater.
Oh yeah, nice.
And then we've got, so Jaws is always going to be a favorite. And some people say it's not a horror movie, but I beg to differ.
Horror movie.
There's you cannot watch Jaws and I know there's a head that pops out of a boat and that's scary, but there's a scene in Jaws where the shark just slowly glides up under the water. You can just barely see it. And there's a guy like crawling up on a boat and the shark is moving so slow behind him. And then it's just the guy's gone. That's a horror movie scene. It was a masterfully done horror movie scene. But my two favorite horror movies are probably The Thing and Alien. And they both hold up remarkably well, being as old as they are. They're great, great movies. I love that. And then I love a lot of modern stuff too. I saw someone mention The Conjuring. I love the Conjuring series. I think it's a great use of building a mythology around horror movies. I saw someone mention Scream. I ran to the theater to go watch the new Scream movie when it came out. So I'm into all of this stuff. I think, I like the elevated horror genre, but I also like just kind of I like slashers and fun horror stuff too. So I'm in it. I mean, this isn't a gimmick for me. This is who I am. I like this stuff.
Well, I think if anybody has read your stuff, they would kind of know what kind of movies you gravitate towards.
Yeah, and and speaking of like adaptations of H.P. Lovecraft stuff, Reanimator is not my favorite Lovecraft adaptation. It's not the best. Not even. I mean, Color Out of Space, which just came out a couple of years ago, is phenomenal.
Dude, right? I think it's definitely a hidden gem.
It is freaky.
And
also, if you like horror movies, go watch The Empty Man. It's on Cinemax all the time.
Hey, I know that one.
It fits Nicolas Cage's acting style. Man, the last act of that just really gives him the chance to spread them freaky wings,
Yeah.
I never hear anyone talk about that movie. It's one that I watched with my brothers, and I was like, that thing was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
Everything by that director. He I draw a blank on his name every time I want to talk about him, but he did another movie called Hardware that was fantastic.
Oh, Hardware is excellent.
Yeah. For me, like my first favorite horror movie was The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I just was fascinated with that movie. And then shortly after that, I got obsessed with the movie Gargoyles.
Oh, dude, what a classic. Yes.
Yeah.
I saw the hell out of me when I was a kid.
Wait.
Theater or something like that, and I was just.
All right, we got to get a little geeky. Have you watched the what was it? The European cut of that movie that's longer?
No, I didn't.
So there's a longer cut of that movie.
Really?
That movie scared me so bad. I don't want to watch anything else about it.
I love that movie as a kid.
Yeah, I really like that. But then let me see. Like Cullen, one of my all-time favorite movies is horror movies is Alien. That just made a very specific impression on me. A family friend of mine, or of ours, she took me to see it when I was, I don't know, I think I was 7 or 8, and I just immediately fell in love with it. And then right around that same time, The Omen made a big impression on me. They took me to the theater to see it. My aunt, took me to the theater to see it. And that David Warner decapitation scene, man, that sent me screaming from the theater,
that is forever embedded in my head as a kid, staying up and watching that with my mom and dad. And I was supposed to be asleep. And that decapitation scene, to this day, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I really thought they killed some dude on the set.
And I don't think The Omen holds up as well today as it was at the time. Partially for me because now I know enough about the Bible and the actual book of Revelation. And so, like they really kind of play fast and loose with that stuff. But there are scenes within it that are top shelf, like the scene where the nanny jumps out the window and hangs herself.
Yes.
Shocking and amazing and horror of the highest order. And the thing, especially because it's got all those Bernie Wrightson monsters in it, I mean, that just does my heart good. Someone just mentioned The Mist. I
love that movie.
I'm such a huge fan of the short story. And then
King one?
Yeah. And then the changes that were made were, I think, in my opinion, elevate the story quite a bit, especially that ending.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, he got a letter from Stephen King saying that Darabont did about like how that ending creeped him out. Like he was like, you managed to creep me out.
Just a fantastic way to end it. Just a crushing ending. And then I really like, so if you buy the right edition, it's got a black and white version.
Yeah, the monster one.
That's my preferred version, and I'll watch that at the drop of a hat. And then my all-time favorite horror films are Return of the Living Dead, Creepshow, The Thing, Alien, and I really have a hard time narrowing it down, but either Prince of Darkness or
Nice.
Madness. Those two kind of wrestle. I like Prince of Darkness as kind of heady, almost physics-based horror, but then in the Mouth of Madness, anything that hews that close to H.P. Lovecraft, that just gets me. But of modern horror, I absolutely fell in love with Hereditary. Love that film, man. And then
the A24 film.
Yeah, A24. Right. And then I just saw Smile, and that was fantastic. Just super creepy. Like it's got one of the best jump scares of any movie ever, and it's not like a visual jump scare. It's a text-based jump scare. I'm gonna spoil this part for listeners.
No, don't spoil anything.
It's really, you haven't seen it yet?
Oh, I've seen it, but I don't spoil. You don't need to spoil it for anybody. They just need to go see the movie.
Let's set it up. It's got one of the most unconventional jump scares in it that it's fantastic.
Don't spoil it because that jump scare is awesome, and
spoiling it would be
that would be unfair. Yeah.
I remember the jump scare in The Exorcist 3 still being one that I was in the theater, and I remember that one was like, I don't think they can surpass this. I didn't see that coming, and I don't think the entire theater saw it coming the way everybody reacted.
I saw it and did.
My gosh.
I love slasher films. I love gore films. I love super splattery films. But the horror that is nearest and dearest to my heart is the really, really transgressive stuff. I have a deep, dark core in me that really likes stuff that sticks to the bones and you can't get it out of your mind. Like someone mentioned The Ring, and I liked The Ring. I thought it was well done. I think it could have used a higher body count. But there's that one shot of the girl in the closet, and that had me turning on lights before I walked into a room for like a week, and I'm a grown ass man.
I out of the modern horror, I think what I really enjoyed was The Descent. I don't know if y'all have seen that.
I really liked it. Yeah.
That was excellent. And the one that came out last year was really good. Barbarian. Barbarian?
I think Barbarian kind of lost it in the third act. It built itself up in such a unique and interesting way, but then the third act becomes such a weird, like almost action movie that I was like, all right.
I loved it. But the third act, I was yelling. I was like, get in the car and go. That big naked lady's coming after you. Oh man, I loved it. I thought it was great.
That I really enjoyed was X. X. Fantastic.
She is a really good actress. Mia Goth, because she was also in Pearl, which is kind of set in the same universe. She's excellent. Like if anything comes out of, I think there's going to be 3 of them. I can't remember what the next one's called.
Yeah, they're working on the third one now. It's called Maxine with 3 X's.
That's it. Yeah, it's the character that she played in X.
Yeah.
Man, this is like some of my favorite conversations I've had in a long time. I love horror movies, so this is fun to me. And I'm interested to see like what people enjoy out of the horror genre. And yeah, I've grown up with it since I was a kid, and then I was in my 20s when I was like, well, let's get artsy, let's go back to these classic horror movies, and I started to rent a lot of the Hammer films and stuff, and I fell in love with that era too. So it's really interesting to see what people enjoy.
I really like horror cinema from the 70s because it's got that almost French cinema verite feel to it. You know, they were trying to go for as real, you know, as possible, really make you feel like you're in the room, you know, whereas a good slasher film, they're not trying to make you feel like you're in the room. They just want to show you something crazy.
Yes. And I'm a big fan of like slasher films too. I love Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is still my favorite one, which I know everybody goes for 1, right? Like that's the one. I
think 2 is one of the stronger ones. I really liked 2, but then I liked that kind of psychological exploration that it indulged in.
You are alone on
I was going to say you're in the minority there.
It's me and 3 other people, you know.
I'm sure it's got a fan following, dude. I like Jason X, and everybody hates that movie, but I like how stupid it got, especially when he became like all buffed up. I was like, this is so ridiculous.
I just like that cryogenic fluid kill, man.
That thing was so badass, dude. The robot or the Matrixy leather robot chick, it was so ridiculous. I love those movies. So yeah, that's another genre though, right? That's the slasher flick. So but I do appreciate those movies too. Gentlemen, this has been a blast. And just one more time, the name of the project they're working on right now is H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator. This is the Eternal Lie Part 2. It's got 17 days. The link is in the description of the video if you want to go and back this project with these 2 wonderful creators that are huge fans of horror. So obviously they know how to deliver a good horror story. Anything else that you guys are working on in the near future where people can find you all?
Well, you can always find me on my website is cullenbunn.com, and from there you can get to just about everything. I do a weekly newsletter which really digs into what's going on in my life, what's going on in my work, what movies I like, what I'm watching, what I'm listening to. It goes into all these things. It's a fun newsletter, comes out every Sunday. I have a Patreon if you're into that sort of thing, where I post serialized novels and bits of comics and comic scripts and how to do comics and just a little bit of everything. But yeah, really the website cullenbunn.com. I just redid it not too long ago, and that's the place to check out and get to everything else.
I'm primarily on Instagram. You can find me at ArtDevil313. I'm currently in the process of trying to put together a number of things, kind of projects that are near and dear to my heart, stuff that, it's not an IP that anybody owns, that kind of thing. I really want to try to push the horror comics genre further and deeper, and so I don't have much to talk about just yet, but I'm hoping I will here shortly. And of course, anything that I come up with, I'll post to my Instagram and to my Twitter, which is also ArtDevil313. And you can see some of my portfolio stuff at cqshep.com.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. Okay, I lied. There's another question because this is a really good question. And by the way, have you guys seen Behind the Mask? That's another one nobody talks about. I love that movie.
That's a good one.
Oh my gosh, I love the Rise of Leslie Vernon. I would have followed that. Like that could have been like 10 movies, and I would have followed that. It's so good because it's like, it tricks you into thinking it's a documentary, and then halfway through it turns into a horror movie, and it's brilliantly done. It's really neat. So the question, this is a really good question because I can't believe I didn't get to ask you guys this, but give me the opportunity with both of you work on the Alien comic.
I'd love to.
Right now it's at Marvel, right? So right now that's what they're doing.
Yeah. before the license went to Marvel, I don't think it's, I mean, it's not a secret. I was actively pitching several Alien series and several Predator series at Dark Horse. You know, I mentioned my Patreon. There's art for those series posted on that Patreon somewhere. But yeah, I was really working on a lot of Alien stuff. I had a really awesome pitch. It'll never go anywhere, so I don't mind telling people about it. I had a great pitch for, you know, an alien infestation on like a water planet, like this last Avatar type movie. So all the aliens were gestating in these sea creatures, and all, you know, things were escalating and blowing up from there. And you know, these were all pitches that I had right before Dark Horse, the license went from Dark Horse to Marvel, and they all, you know, vanished. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I don't think you're ever going to see that, but it would be cool. It would be cool.
I'd love to, as long as I haven't seen any of the Marvel stuff, so I don't know how far down the hole they're willing to take it. As long as I could be, you know, because the thing about Aliens is that, you know, in my opinion, they're some of the finest monsters ever to grace movies. But in order to do them right, you got to get real gory with it. And so if I were going to do it, I'd have to be given free rein to get super splattery. And as long as I had that green light, I'd jump in.
Well, those are both great answers. Very nice. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today, and thank you to the chat for asking wonderful questions, especially about Transformers. I didn't think that was going to come up, but I'm glad somebody brought it up organically. And again, the link to the Kickstarter is in the description of the video, and you can check out Cullen on his website and follow Blacky Shepherd at his Instagram to check out what he's working on next. It's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay healthy. We're going to make those hardcovers happen, Cullen. Okay. We're gonna get
thanks to everybody who joined in and asked
happen.
questions. It was awesome.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.